Hey guys, it's Eric back for another video, and I was debating whether to make yet another video on the Budapest Gambit or switch gears and cover a different opening. And I ultimately decided that yes, we do need at least one more Budapest Gambit video. There have been a lot of comments, questions from viewers, and I want to spend some time answering a few more things and showing just some more interesting lines. And I want to start with a correction to something I mentioned in the first Budapest video I uploaded in the line where white declines the gambit. And there were a few people that reached out in the YouTube comments and also just private messages saying that the line I suggested was actually bad for black. And I will say that I did not suggest the best line. So in the previous video, I showed this line after bishop c5, explaining black already has a good position. And then after bishop to g5, this is a blunder due to bishop takes f2. And so far, this is all correct. But after king takes f2, it turns out the move to play is knight g4 and not knight e4. I think in the video I said knight e4 and black wins the bishop and everything is good. What I didn't realize is white has a really interesting resource after knight e4. And it may require some help from the engine to figure out what's going on in this position and how white emerges okay. But I would encourage viewers, if you don't necessarily see the way that white is surviving here, pause the video and find the best continuation for white. And to my shock, the move to play for white is king e3. And if we turn on the engine, I don't think it finds any advantage for black. Amazingly enough, like the king's on e3, the bishop's attacked twice. If we start looking at the variations, it becomes not so clear. So if black takes on g5 with the knight, white has this move h4, trapping the knight. And white is actually coming out better despite the king being on e3. There's there's not enough compensation for black losing the piece. And meanwhile, if black goes for queen takes g5, then white can play king takes e4. And this is one of the most ridiculous positions that I've seen in a while. But I was doing some digging here, and it seems like white's okay, even though the king is smack in the center on move 7. I had the engine running a little bit ago. I can turn it on now, and we'll switch views here. At first it says black has some compensation, but if you give it enough time to think, it struggles to find some advantage. I think eventually it just decides that black has to go for some repetition. Some very strange repetition. Queen g6, king e3, queen b6. And of course, on a practical level, this is probably still playable, and there's probably still room for white to go wrong. For example, king f3 apparently being the best move. I think it would be very easy to play king d3. A line like this, okay, black has some compensation. Still looks fun to play for black. King f3, the computer sees no better than queen f6 and going back and forth. So I'm sure it's possible to do a lot more analysis from this position. But if you're playing this line as black, I think all you need to know is that you should not play knight e4, but rather play knight g4. Avoid any line where the king comes to win the knight. And this is just crushing for black. I think there was another comment that mentioned, let me switch views here, that in this position after bishop to g5, another possibility is knight e4. And this is also nice for black, kind of a fancy idea that if white takes a queen, then it's mate in 1. I don't think knight e4 is as strong as bishop takes f2 immediately, for the reason that white can play bishop e3 here. And it's still better for black. Like black can take, play queen, queen h4. Gets a little bit weird, like g3, knight takes g3, knight f3. Turn on the engine here and see what it thinks. Saying queen h5, rook g1. Yeah, also better for black. But my personal preference would be to go for the bishop takes f2 line. So hopefully that clears things up. And yeah, if people have further questions or further corrections, please let me know in the comments. But I do want to move on and show some new variations, new insights. I'm going to switch chapters here. And I do want to note, if I switch views again, that all of the analysis that I'm doing can be accessed in this Lichess study. Everything's organized into chapters, and I'll leave a link in the video description so people are free to check this out and do your own analysis. So for now, I'm going to move on to chapter 4. And I want to start from this position. And I want to show a line that I think a lot of players who play the Budapest maybe wouldn't be familiar with, because it's one of those variations you might overlook when studying an opening, but it's not that easy to figure out what to do against. So the line I'm referring to is in the main line after knight to g4. White has seemingly very powerful move. At least it looks powerful at first, queen d4. Attacking the knight, defending the pawn, and really putting the question to black, like what to do here. And this is actually a good moment. I would encourage viewers to pause the video and try and find the way to punish queen d4. I will say that there's a very nice response from black, which leads to very pleasant position. So black to move, find the best move. And the move is pawn to d6. And it's a multi-purpose move. First of all, it's defending the knight. Secondly, it's attacking the e5 pawn. And it's attempting to open up the position in black's favor. If the position opens up, then the queen will potentially be more vulnerable on d4. So after d6, we can look at a few lines. Let's imagine white takes, looks most natural. And then it may seem possible that black could take with the bishop, but I wouldn't recommend leaving the g2 pawn hanging. The move I recommend here is knight c6. Nice move, attacking the queen. Again, note that the knight is defended on g4, so black is just keeping some initiative. Now, if white really wants to be greedy and hold on to all the material possible, white can go for queen e4 check, preventing black from recapturing immediately and forcing black to block the check. And now there's a really cool line coming up. Okay, black can start with bishop e6, developing and blocking the check. And let's imagine white takes on c7. If we count material, white has not lost a single pawn yet, and black, at least temporarily, is down 3 pawns. And I will say it looks very natural for black to just recapture and try and get some compensation. But I will say that there is a better move than queen takes c7 here, and it's a move I discovered earlier with the engine. Very hard move to find, but I'll give viewers a chance to pause the video, try and find the best move for black, which is not queen takes c7. And the move just kind of comes out of nowhere. Queen d1 check. Not a move that you see every day, especially when there's nothing on d1. The point of this move is, of course, that we drive the king to d1 and we set up the fork on f2. And very quickly, black will win back material and just have very nice play. Okay, the king has to move. Of course, we recapture the queen. And the c7 pawn is a goner. Once black wins c7, which could be any time reasonably soon, then black will just be down 1 pawn. but there's massive compensation here. I mean, white has nothing developed. There's ideas of knight to d4 or knight b4, targeting c2, and we should note that the king is tied down to defending f2. Not to mention that black has bishop c5 coming to further fight for the f2 square. Also, the c4 pawn is hanging too, so this just looks like a terrible position for white. And I think the computer agrees. Computer is giving some evaluation. When I first turn it on, it's saying minus 0.3. So maybe not too terrible, but that's usually a pretty good valuation if you're down a pawn, but the computer still favors your side. So, okay, hopefully this helps some people. If you ever encounter queen d4, just know to play d6. And if you remember this queen d1 idea, it could be helpful in that line. So one more variation I would like to cover. There was a comment which I did not take a screenshot of, but someone was asking about middle game plans emerging from one of the main lines. So I wanted to take a moment to show just a really nice instructive game, which very nicely demonstrates one of the main middle game plans from the Budapest. So let's switch to chapter 5 here, and we'll go through with the main typical variation. c4, e5 takes knight g4. And now there's a moment coming up which I didn't mention in any of the previous videos, but it's important to point out that if white plays knight f3 before playing bishop to f4, then it opens up another possibility for black. Now, of course, black could still continue with knight c6, and after bishop f4, things would transpose. But if you get to this position, I would recommend starting with bishop to c5. This is a nice nuance, essentially forcing white to play pawn e3. There's no other good way to defend the f2 pawn. And after pawn e3, this bishop on c1, it's a bit more sad. Can't develop actively, and now black can continue with knight c6 and very easily win back the pawn. We can imagine if white plays queen d5, then black can play simply queen e7, and the pawn on e5 is just a goner. So going forward from here, I do want to show how the game can unravel and how black should not only complete development, but know what to do in the middle game. So let's imagine play continues, knight c3, takes e5. Let's say the knights get traded. I will say that there's another transposition which can arise if you take on e5 and white plays bishop to e2. Black could take, and after white takes back, black could go for knight e5. And in many cases, white is inclined to play bishop e2 to hold on to the bishop pair, and it would be essentially the same position. In this game, white took immediately, black takes back, and then bishop e2. Castling, castling. Now black plays rook e8. Very flexible move. In some cases, if this knight comes to e4 or a4, then it's common for the bishop to drop back to f8, keeping the king side safe, getting out of the way of everything else. In this game, white played pawn a3. And this is a very typical plan for white, is to try and expand on the queen side with pawn b4, and of course fianchetto the dark squared bishop to b2. So in this position, there's a very kind of thematic and natural preventive move for black, simply pawn a5. Preventing b4, trying to fight for some space on the queen side. And there's another idea of a5 which is a little bit hidden. And normally white will play b3 here, again trying to continue with the fianchetto. And in this position, I would highly encourage viewers to pause the video and try and find some plan for black. Like, how would you continue over the next few moves? If you had a few moves in a row, what would you do to maybe not only complete development, but fight for some advantage? And I think a lot of players would consider something like d6, and then just developing the bishop normally maybe to f5, and just play chess, which is a completely fine way of playing. The thing about this position is that there's another Very unusual idea, but it works in this position for the reason that there's nothing on the 6 rank for black. And black can immediately go for the rook lift with rook a6. And it looks very bizarre, but this is actually a difficult plan for white to meet, because very quickly black wants to play rook h6, queen h4, and just create a mating attack. And the combination of, okay, eventually playing d6 and having the light squared bishop to help out, the knight centralized on e5, there's some very nice harmony for black's pieces. So I want to show a game between two players that took place in 1993. I don't want to hurt myself pronouncing the names of these players, but I'll switch the view here just so people can see. Some person was playing white, and then some person was playing black. So the game continued, bishop to b2, rook h6, and now knight to d5. So white's trying to get some play, at least in the center, unleashing the bishop, centralizing the knight, maybe having some ideas of knight f4. Black simply responds with d6, and now white goes for b4. So finally achieving the expanding move on the queen side. And the beautiful thing coming up is that black just completely ignores the pawn on b4 and focuses solely on the king side. And the next several moves, if I'm not mistaken, just for the rest of the game, black just continues making threats until white is completely lost. So the obvious move to play here, the move I basically already mentioned, queen h4, going for the mate on h2, only one way for white to defend, pawn h3. And now there is a very juicy looking sacrifice. It's actually hard to call it a sacrifice, because if white takes it, white will just be dead, but the move is bishop takes h3. Yeah, just destroying the king side. If white takes back, then the queen can take, and I don't think there's any stopping some kind of mate on h2 or h1. So in the game, white was suffering. White could not take the bishop, but rather played pawn g3. Black continues making threats, queen e4, saving the queen, threatening mate on g2. Really only one way for white to stop the mate is to play pawn f3, which is a very unfortunate move for white to play, as now it weakens the defense of the e3 pawn. Black simply takes it, and after knight takes e3, queen takes e3, rook f2, the position essentially played itself, queen g5, targeting g3, and white played one more move, bishop e5, rook e5, and then played one more move after this bishop f1 and just ran into queen takes g3, and then it's just forced mate from here. But already at this point, white is pretty much hopeless. Like, even if white plays a move like g4, trying to stop queen takes g3, then there would be queen h4. And the queen is just infiltrating. Almost impossible to stop queen g3, and then there's going to be all these mating patterns with the rook on the h-file. So this was a really nice game. I believe the white player in this game was rated over 2200. It's a game I just found in the Masters database on Lichess. So not a bad way to crush a master with the Budapest Gambit. Okay, hopefully these lines give some more insight into how to play the Budapest aggressively and effectively. And I would encourage people to explore on your own. Feel free to investigate further on the Lichess study. Everything is here. People are more than welcome to use Opening Explorer to find games and research the most popular moves. I think it's best if you have a Lichess account to analyze. And I'll show one more trick here, that if people want to kind of analyze on your own and save all of your analysis, you can very easily go to clone the study. Scroll down here and just click the clone button. And then cloning the study will just create a study that you own, and then you can even add your own chapters or change the privacy settings. So really have to thank leechess.org for allowing some really nice functionality. So I think I'll end it there. Hope you guys enjoyed that. As always, let me know if you have questions or feedback in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.